This is One-on-One with Jasper Cole, Hollywood's bad guy, and so much more. Actor, talent manager, producer, and more. Now he's sitting down with today's top newsmakers from entertainment, politics, pop culture, and beyond. This is One-on-One with Jasper Cole.
Woohoo! All right. Howdy, 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 and welcome to One-on-One with Jasper Cole. This is your host, Mr. Jasper Cole, and we are live today at Temple Bay Studios right here in Hollywood, California. And please go to social media and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That's Jasper Cole Says, S-A-Y-S. You can go to Facebook. It's Jasper Cole. There's going to be a lot of Jasper Cole here. There's jaspercole.com. There's a link on my website for the show, One-on-One with Jasper Cole. And also all the archive shows are there. I wanted to say also yesterday was National Radio Day. And I wanted to give a shout out to Ralph Cole Jr. and Dara Zane Scully, who used to be my co-host before I fired them on the other show, and also Dominic Friesen, John Williams, and Brandon Brewer, my producers, and all my loyal listeners for the last almost 9 years now. Sometimes it can be a lonely job sitting in the booth, but I always have a guest, and that brings me to today's very special guest. I'm really excited because he's a member of the Newman Thomas Management family, and he is all the way here from New York City visiting and working, Mr. Daniel Mitura. Hey, buddy.
Hello. Great to be
Welcome.
here.
We finally see each other face to face.
I know.
The last time Dan was in town, I didn't get to see you because I'm out in Palm Springs, and then it's so weird because I'm here all the time, and then sometimes it seems like I don't get in.
We're good on Facebook and Instagram. I feel like
which is the way most relationships are.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But
the distance can be healthy.
You're here a lot. Yeah, you have family here.
Back and forth.
Yeah. So welcome, Daniel, everybody. Where can everyone find you on social media? Or
I am on Instagram at DJM2124.
Perfect.
To search for me. Yeah.
They can just find you there.
Yeah.
Daniel is an actor, a writer, a producer, a director, the caterer, anything else?
Bartender.
Back in the day. From Texas, originally. Tell
Dallas,
everybody,
Texas.
like, your journey, like where this began. You grew up in Texas.
I grew up in Texas and went to school in New York City from Dallas to Manhattan. Yeah, and then I was right in the middle of it, really, from when I went to school.
Right.
So it was like, writing and acting and producing shows off Broadway and from
theater's a great love of yours, right?
Yeah. And I was doing that in high school. So
right. I was going to ask you. So is that when the bug kind of bit you? Was in high school?
Well, I started as a musician. I played the piano since I was 4 years old, and so I was performing from a young age. And
even I'm learning something new today.
People always asked me about public speaking because I would, speak, and I was like, well, when I was 4, I was in front of people playing, and I just thought it was normal.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, like I would give concerts, and I had all the music memorized, and I, did the bows, and I was dressed up.
I had no idea. This is a whole new side of you.
Yeah, and I played the oboe as well, and so then I kind of, was interested then in musical theater was kind of like a bridge.
A natural sort of.
And then I did musical theater, and I said, well, I actually really like the other parts of this,
Right.
Music kind of got me into it, and I, thought more about performing from that. So, and then I was in high school, and I was like acting in and writing and producing plays.
Right,
and so
right.
It's like I was just sort of always doing that.
It was sort of
natural.
a part of, it was starting out in musical theater, so performing was a natural thing.
Yeah.
Do you have that in your family at all? Or are you sort of like the lone performer in the family?
Just me. Yeah. So I think maybe that's part of it, is like being the only one. You know? It's like,
did you, growing up, were there TV and films that you really liked, or TV shows that sort of influenced you? Were you into TV and film at all, or was it more theater in the beginning?
I always loved movies, and I loved watching 3 to 4 movies a day during the summer. Wow. If I stayed home during the summer and just watched movies back to back, I always loved it. I never saw much of a difference, really. I guess because I'm not on the technical side, just so as a performer, if you're writing, I, just sort of thought about what's the best way to tell a story, if it's theater or film. And I'm not a DP. I don't know about
You're not looking at it technically, like setting up the shots and stuff.
And in both theater and film, I've always really respected the people that, the lighting designers that do these like amazing things.
All the different departments. Because it is a collaboration. A lot of people forget.
Yeah. And they have amazing skills that I I don't have. And
right.
so,
well, and I always say, actors we're important in the storyline and we're important in the will, but we're really like way down on the bottom.
I know.
A lot of actors need to remember that when they start misbehaving on sets.
Oh my gosh. And, a lot of the magic is really elsewhere, so acting is sometimes being the simplest, part of the puzzle,
right? And
just doing your job and saying the lines, and then everything else is happening around you.
Yeah. So, were you more into comedies growing up in terms of films, or there's certain? Did you now? I feel like you're in your late 20s. How old do we talk about that?
Yeah, late 20s.
So I'm just trying to think of like what movies were coming up during that time when you were.
Well, it's funny. I feel like television when I was growing up was mostly comedies. Mm-hmm. Like it was like all the great sitcoms. I mean, I remember Frasier and Friends and Seinfeld. Yeah. And so television, these cable dramas didn't really exist. Mm-mm. And then
we still had mainly the network shows, and we had HBO Showtime. We hadn't gotten into the streaming.
Yeah.
All the 95 choices of places now, all the platforms,
So I feel like then film, obviously it was like the golden age of like Miramax at that time. Right. And so I actually really loved all of
Speaking of Harvey Weinstein.
But those prestige dramas, so it was kind of this weird balance of like going to the movies was to see
the quality sort of
the hours or something.
Right. And then you had but ironically, like I said, these were like the quality comedies of the day also.
Yeah. Expertly written and performed comedies. So, yeah.
And so when you went to school, you went to college at NYU or Columbia.
Yeah.
So had that been a goal of yours? Did you know early on, I'm going to probably go to New York when you were in high school? Did you apply to different schools or?
I applied to schools in New York and LA and
pay your way in.
No, I didn't need it. No,
I know you didn't need it.
No, I think really I went there because it was in New York City. Mm-hmm. So that was the choice, and to experience New York City.
You had always been sort of drawn to knowing you were going to go. You had obviously been there growing up a lot. Or
I visited one time before I went. Yeah.
Oh, see, I had this vision of you like going every summer with the family to see Broadway and stuff like that.
No, visited one time and saw Sweeney Todd, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
That was my
So
only
you kind of did
experience.
arrive just sort of, it was a fresh experience for you.
Into Manhattan.
And you've kind of fell in love with the city, right?
Yeah, well, it has everything. So it's...
Well, now remember, New York is like, well, LA and New York especially, there's always been that sort of like people, I love them both, but for years there's been the New Yorkers hate LA and a lot of LA people don't quite get New York.
I think they exist in that sort of like combination, so you can be in one and hate the other and then be in the other, and they sort of allow you, if you have them both, then you can sort of like go back and forth.
There's good and bad to both.
Yeah, they set each other off in a great way, I think. And
well, in terms of the industry now, for many, many years, LA, California was more like TV and film. I think New York now has like 25, 26 television shows, but, Atlanta has even more. So it's funny how the Southeast is now sort of trumped. Oh, God, no pun intended. It's sort of taken over for even what New York had in terms of TV and film.
Yeah.
So in terms of your career now, so when you came to the city, you started doing, after college, you started doing theater.
Yeah, even during college.
So you actually started what was your major in college?
Art history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And you sort of still work in that area
and it's very much like, it was a good education because it was about artists and, artists finding their identity and how you make a stamp visually and all of that. So, it reminded me a lot. And I took a lot of theater classes as well. So it wasn't just art history, but that's where my major ended up. Yeah.
And so were you doing off-Broadway or off-Broadway in college?
Yeah, even when I was a senior.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I kind of, figured that stuff out by the time. Yeah.
And are you still to this day close to, do you have like collaborations with other people from college in New York, or is that sort of?
I do actually. Yeah. I really just maybe one person that I've worked with a lot. So yeah.
Great. Well, I know you've done a lot of theater, but more in the last few years, you ventured into film.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the early projects that you did that you we really want to get to and promote.
It was part of a great short called The Hobbyist. And we just had our 100th festival screening, which was great. Not that I went to all 100, but our producer did.
He really?
He did, yeah. And he's amazing. His name is David Mayer of Airbed Productions. He's great, and he's like really been on the case. And so we've showed up and we had a screening in Williamsburg, and it was wonderful to see.
Because I don't know, a lot of people may not understand the festival world is a world among itself, right? I mean, there's a whole thing. There's hundreds of festivals.
Yeah, and it's a great community. You can meet other filmmakers, actors,
networking.
But it takes a long time. So you film something, and then we were watching it, and it's like a time capsule. You're like, oh my gosh, my hair was different.
17 then. That's what I do with film and TV too. But tell everyone what The Hobbyist is about. What's the story?
Yeah, it's a kind of a crime thriller. It's based on a short story by Frederick Brown, and really the script is very much like the short story. It fits on a single 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Very simple, about a man who goes to this druggist who is known in the area to have an undetectable, untraceable poison. But then there's like 2 or 3 great twists in all of 6 minutes to what happens. And I guess you would say the genre is kind of a neo-noir.
It does have a very film noir quality to it. You're really great in it. So
thank you.
You had the longer hair then.
Yeah. And it's funny watching it now, and I meet people, and there were really just 2 actors, and my co-star Robert looks exactly the same, and
they don't know who you are.
People come up to him and they're like, "Oh my God, you were amazing!" And they're like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I'm like,
and you're like, "I'm in the movie. You just saw me." Yeah, they don't recognize you.
And then I say
it's a totally
that,
different look.
I say that, and then they're like, "Oh, that was a great wig," and I'm like, "That wasn't a wig."
Well, they just assume because you have your hair short now. Yeah. Was it a great part to play for you?
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, it in every possible way. Yeah, it was so much fun. And really because, my co-star Robert, and it's basically just the 2 of us as the film, he's in his 70s. So there's this great contrast between us and
to him.
Yeah,
also.
And he's got a very different kind of style of acting as well. And so I think, sort of a generational difference. And these 2 people who are antagonists, it works really well. And we had fun together because we make totally different choices. Yeah, and I think we really kind of like played off each other well, because the way he likes to take his like really big pauses and kind of chew on some lines, and it works. And that's just not my
Did you guys rehearse? Was there a lot of rehearsal for this, sort of like a little play, or
we did a couple
mini play?
We had a couple of read-throughs, which I liked, like a couple weeks before, and we had some time in the space, and we actually kind of
blocked it out.
We blocked it out, and we had some time to kind of like, there's some stuff we cut on set, and we're both kind of like, well, we don't need this, or there was one part that was actually ad-lib that was like a little monologue, and so it was fun to do that, knowing the character.
Knowing it, yeah. How long was the shoot?
It was like 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah.
But
long days.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I always say, whether you're shooting a short or a full length, you give it the same amount of attention and dedication. It's shot the same way. You just do it in less amount of time.
Yeah.
How did that project come to you?
Just through a straight audition? Agent audition.
Really?
Just the regular old,
the other regular way, right?
Yeah.
Now, so you've produced theater as well.
Yeah.
Is that something you're still interested in doing?
My own projects, and I think at least being involved as a producer in my own projects, and maybe not totally taking all the work and shepherding them, but definitely having that piece just so creatively to have that control as a producer, I think is really important in theater. Because in theater you have something that's going to premiere once it happens. Maybe sometimes just once, whereas a film, films get rediscovered later in a director, actor's career. Yeah, and so theater, it's like very particular in how it's presented, how that first week, the opening night, the previews, the reviews. Very sensitive. Yeah. So I think you really have to have some ownership over it.
Right.
or else, there's missed opportunities. Things open at the wrong time, or that.
But as an actor, I always say there's nothing like doing a play, because, when the curtain goes up, and it's rarely in TV and film do we get to like sustain a performance for 2 hours, even if you're just in and out. So from an acting point of view, for me, theater is everything, because it's not we have more control on the stage, because it's us. Even though you've rehearsed and you've taken the director's notes, by the time opening night happens, it's your show. It's your baby. Yeah. And every night it's a different audience, so it feels like it's a different kind of play. It would almost be like if you shot the movie every day differently. It would be different, Yeah. But I mean, it's hard to... For me, it's hard to find the time now to do a play, because I do the TV and film stuff. So it's kind of like you have to sort of find time to do it. But so anyway, so you now have another new project. Tell everyone about that.
Yeah, so it's just been released on, it's available on Amazon Prime for free. And it's called Loyalty, which I'm acting in and wrote. And this is with one of my collaborators, actually, that we met in school, strangely enough, who's from LA. And
ironically, from LA.
Yeah, Lauren Chaffel. And she's been on a whole spate of different sitcoms when she was growing up, and had that life growing up.
She was sort of a child actress.
Yeah, child actor, and is, working regularly now, with me and lots of other people. Yeah. And so it's interesting to go to New York and then meet the
funny
LA person.
Yeah, she grew up here and she ends up in New York, and then, Yeah. And so it's you, Patrick.
And Patrick Shane, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Patrick, had you known Patrick for a while, or was that just...
I've known Patrick for maybe 3-4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, Lauren's at longer stage. So yeah.
So how did you guys come up with this project, with Loyalty? What was the genesis for it?
Well, I think that, for me, I think as a writer, a lot of what I was thinking about, I think a lot about language, obviously, as a writer, and really a lot of things get filtered through our current state of the world that we live in.
Chaos.
And I say it like that because I consume a lot of news about politics, but I don't like to do things that are totally on the nose about it, but sort of responding to the way that it affects us as humans.
Right.
And so, the title and the idea of Loyalty came from, and we don't want to give airtime to too many things, but this is, I want loyalty, I need loyalty, I demand loyalty.
Sure.
The sort of quotes, and what does that actually mean, and what did that mean to him when he was saying it? And it just sort of meant that you agree with me whenever I'm doing the thing that I'm saying,
no matter what.
And also the sort of mob element of it, which is maybe the more entertaining element of it when it's Goodfellas and not Our Lives. So that was kind of when where that came from in the movie is about these sort of who is tricking whom and who's allied with whom, and the point to where it becomes like a farce, which is I think what we actually see in our political system is these people that are defending, and then they leave the administration, and then they're like, well, he was the worst person to work with, but I didn't say that. And it's we actually sort of seeing this
off record,
play
on record, off record.
Yeah. So really what I was thinking of was the absurdity of that. I think absurdity is the best word for that, to the point of, that it's in a very real place, and then it becomes kind of like farce and comedy.
Well, yeah, it changes throughout your piece also. And like you said, who's really loyal in the piece, and who are they loyal to? And
what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah.
And that's kind of a question I ask now, what people are thinking of that. So, yeah.
Well, and like you said, even with the current president we have, I mean, depending on who you talk to, there are people that will say, well, I'm just happy because my 401k is doing really well. I really don't care about if he's a racist or whatever.
Right.
Make sure my money's okay.
Yeah.
And,
Well, there's a very interesting thing about, does the end justify the means? And most people will tell you absolutely not, never. But then you see that playing out. It's interesting because we're in the middle of it. So I think that the best thing to do is reflect it, to process it. And then, 10 years from now, we'll look back and see where it is. But and I don't like things to become strident in any way and say, well, this is wrong because of this is the way. It's more just like putting a mirror up to it. And then, do people find that absurd, or do they think that's just reality? You know, it's like there used to be satire and farce, and now if you do a farce, does it just seem like reality?
The lines are so blurred.
Yeah.
It's like reality TV has blended into, well, it literally blended into the presidency.
Exactly. Which is fascinating in a sociological way. It's just terrifying to live through it. So,
well, like today they announced the Dances with the Stars cast, and Sean Spicer's in it, the former speaker, press person, the little midget. I
don't know why they just can't have Melissa McCarthy do it.
Maybe, well, she probably should, or Kate McKinnon at least. Maybe if Jeff Sessions ends up on the next cast.
Oh my God, someone will have to carry him.
Kate could come in and do that. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as someone that was living in New York, you've been in New York, like you said, since college.
Yeah.
You know, Trump was a fixture in New York, but not in a great way. He was sort of a joke.
No.
Always was a joke.
Yeah, it seemed like the bad joke that couldn't become real.
Right.
Yeah, although, I mean, his real heyday was like in the 80s, right? In New York, and so, yeah.
So that's even more ironic. Well, it's The Apprentice, the Celebrity Apprentice that sort of put him, kept him in the flyover, I call it the flyover state. The rest of America, besides the coast, you know, they sort of believed that was really him. They believed he was a successful businessman, which he's not.
Yeah.
Really wasn't.
Well, the power of performance.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they were sort of, and they also believed, like you talk about in loyalty, like whatever he was saying, we're speaking. And then a lot of it was just a vote against the other candidate.
Right.
She was so hated.
Right.
By many people. So it's like, I heard a lot of people say to me, well, I hated them both. I just voted for the worst of the two evils.
Which isn't really how life should work, right? I mean, life is supposed to be about like,
or they didn't vote.
And we should be more positive about the universe, I think.
But I think some people just felt like, well, then I'm just not going to vote because I can't vote for either one.
Yeah, and I think there's something, one of the things that I think about a lot is just because we all think about this as, people that create and perform is like, what is the nature of engagement? And so people are not engaged. They weren't engaged with the process. And what engages people? What do they still care about? What is like a good message, and the importance of really making things that have some kind of a message. And again, not something that's like hitting you over the head, but like that
makes you think,
but
it doesn't tell you what to think.
Right.
Which is the key, I think
if people just get back to thinking a little bit more, then...
But sadly, that's the problem. I think... I actually said on a show recently that, and this is so this is like hypothetical, it's never going to happen. But imagine if before you were allowed to vote, like when you registered to vote, you also had to take a test. And you have to pass a test to be able to vote. There's basic knowledge.
Oh, I see.
About our country, our government, how it works. I mean, I don't even know if I could pass it. No, but the truth is, it's like when you take your driver's test after you've been driving for 20 years, you make all the basic mistakes, and you're just like, what do you mean? But it would sort of weed out. It would be, I want voting to be a privilege.
Right.
Not just like, everybody can vote because I have a pulse. That's never going to happen.
Yeah. I always thought it'd be great if they had a questionnaire and it just sort of asked you about yourself and your socioeconomic position, and then actually told you who the best candidate for you based on their platforms would be. Interest. And then you have a choice. But so it's not actually a personality contest. It's like, well, the public positions lean this way, and for you, you live in Nebraska, and you're, so actually this candidate is the best for you. And
you live in Nebraska.
Yeah, or you live in Oklahoma.
We sympathize.
Yeah.
We've started a telethon for you to get the fuck out. But besides that, vote for this person.
So people would understand if they're voting against their interests or not.
Right.
To have that information. So, and I don't always know if people have that information.
So, who do you remember who the first president you voted for? Which election was your first time you voted for president? Was it Obama?
It was Obama, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like I've been speaking recently about, so imagine 3 years ago, so let's say someone that was 18, they're 21 now. So this past 2016 was their first election, their first foray into politics. So it must be amazing. I've got friends who have kids that age. I could have kids that age. trying to explain to them that this is really what an anomaly this really has been.
Well, I thought about something really positive about this, and maybe not true, but my thought was, because I remember, and everyone and the excitement around Obama and all that kind of stuff, which was great. And then I kind of thought, well, for a lot of, my friends that see that that's not always the case, and it's actually would be the same for this 18 or 21-year-old, then this person who could be voting for the next 50, 60 years will always remember. And so that may not
we can't let that happen again.
It may not be much consolation, but, Obama was a great example, but it made people complacent because they're like, well, we've done this. Racism is over. We've reached the moral arc of history is now.
We're only going to continue forward now.
Yeah. And so to have this horrible reminder that people will never forget, and these people who are going to be voting for decades and decades and decades is maybe something positive to bring out.
And that we can never take it for granted.
Exactly. And I hope that they won't.
And I think that's what this whole woke movement, that is part of it. It really did sort of wake people up, and we saw that in the midterm now with all the turnout. People were just, galvanized from what's happened with Trump, because we're just not believing that it's happening. And the thing about what Trump's presidency has sort of put a light on is all the areas of government that we all just kind of assumed was going to be taken care of. Like, it was in law. It was a law that you would have to submit your taxes, or it was a law that you could, you know what I mean? He's really put a light on just how loose all that really was.
I have never heard so many people talking about constitutional law and impeachment ever. They used to do these things on like jaywalking, and people didn't know who the president was. But now people are having these in-depth conversations about like the, clauses in the Constitution. And like, so it's another, possible positive thing that like, it's actually like by breaking all these laws, it's actually making
people wake up.
Yeah.
And it's back to the whole thing about people say, even if Trump loses in 2020, he's not going to leave office. And someone was saying to me, well, he can't do that. I go, oh, watch. There's probably 20 loopholes that we're just not aware of yet that he will, he'll put an appeal in, and it'll go 2 years. And this is how governments like Venezuela, this is how the leaders never left. They stayed in. And, I'm not quite, Bill Maher, I don't know if you watch Bill Maher on Friday nights, but Real Time on HBO, he really believes Trump's not going to leave. And he'll be he'll have the military and the police on his side. He'll have all the Republican senators, and he's never going to leave.
Well, one of the faults of the system is that, the Constitution was written at a time of the Enlightenment, and so there was this actual idea that people who were elected would have like basic human decency and values, because the Enlightenment and the French Revolution had this idea that people had basic goodness and rights,
morals,
and potential and morals. And so there was kind of these loopholes, and they just said, well, we don't have to write this in law because no one would ever possibly do that. In the Constitutional Convention, they talked about those things and like, well, we don't have to write that down. And so, that is one of the blind spots of besides other major blind spots of the Constitution, but that we didn't, so in some ways you have this kind of person, and if we survive the system, then it'll be stronger from it.
But I agree I think you're right. It's like, in a way, it's been a good thing if we survive, and I think we will. I mean, I never thought we would survive 8 years of George W. Bush, and I would pay him to come back. You know what I mean?
Well, be careful.
Well, I would.
There are still other family members.
Compared to Trump, I mean, it's like, but like you said, it's always going to be now, like, it can never be as bad as Trump. But we shouldn't say that, because it could be. We have to always remember. And I want people to be engaged. So that brings me to a point. What do you think about entertainers and actors, artists who get involved in politics? Because do you think it's a good thing that we should lend our voices? Because there's a real fine line there, some people want to say, why don't you just stay in Hollywood and shut the fuck up? And I
think you should only lend your voice in that case to augment the voices of people who don't have that platform.
Of the more
so it's great, if you're an actor that's talking about politics, do it in a way that you're trying to empower people with the platform that you have, and not just making it about yourself. I mean, I think there's certain things that can be very beneficial and like actually, you know, in the environment. And so, you know, those efforts like Leonardo DiCaprio and that kind of thing, like where it's actually helping and bringing a light to it and doing the documentary, more people would see it than otherwise see it. So I think there's very like good uses of that.
Of your statue and power.
Yeah.
The whole, you know, the Green Deal, the climate change, that's one thing your generation and younger in particular are really big on and really pushing, which
we're the ones that can't outlast it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So it's like, you know, it's up to you and generations coming after you to really wake up and do something. But there is this theory that it's too late. I never think it's too late. I mean, you know, there's just, it's, in many ways, in terms of social issues as well, like we finally were able to get gay marriage because enough older people were dying off. I mean, you know, we need the younger generation to sort of change things and get rid of us. And that's part of the problem with the Senate, with Mitch McConnell and some of those old trolls that are still, you know.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is that, you know, the Senate and the House haven't kept up with the diversity that the electorate has gained. So, you know,
it doesn't match.
Yeah. And I think it's slowly coming more to match, although I think there's only one African-American Republican House member, you know, so it's still taking time.
Did he resign? Didn't he just quit?
I think he's going to quit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there are now many more women in the Senate, not enough, but it's the trend is going in that direction. So I think that part of the problem is that the checks and balances that are created, like, don't have the right constituencies yet to achieve the sort of balance that was envisioned originally, like of the sort of idea that you continually form different majorities of interest so that no one party can take over.
Power.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Electoral College issue? Because I mean that was created at a time when it was an entirely different world and population wise, and so, you know, in the last, Republicans have only won because of the electoral.
Well, you know, it's funny, your suggestion about, you know, having people take a test is actually why the Electoral College was created, is this fear of like direct elections.
Right.
So, you know, I think that it would be nice to get rid of it, but then, you know, because it's actually not working the way that it was intended.
You think?
Yeah. So, but how
do we do that?
How do we do, you know, it's a question of education. So I don't know.
And rewriting the Constitution. I mean, that's a big part of a lot of these problems.
Right. And I wonder, though,
which can be done.
You know, this sort of fear of like the tyranny of the majority and that, you know, the blue states and the cities will take over. You know, I kind of question, like, what are the interests that you know, you said flyover states.
Right.
But what actually would they lose in this? I mean, they're just going to be given health care? I mean, what
are they giving up?
Yeah.
And why shouldn't the popular vote be the vote? I mean, the popular vote would be, I mean, in any other, growing up in life, I mean, what else, when you're in high school, when you're doing a school election, it didn't suddenly go, well, you got all the votes, but the committee over here decided.
Well, I mean, the Senate already protects the small states by giving them all equal representation.
Right, which is a whole other issue, too, because California gets the same number as Vermont.
Right.
Or the Dakotas, or... It's like, what do they really need?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, because, like, you know, something like James Madison envisioned like a certain number of people being represented by a single representative. So the disparity between the House of Representatives and the Senate wasn't so great. You know, but also James Madison didn't envision technology. And so the fact that, you know, these senators can reach their constituencies and, it's a good question. How big is too big? Maybe India as a democracy at 1 billion people is too large.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes you think.
Yeah.
Makes you think. So, what's next? What's happening? I know you've got some other projects.
Part of the reason I've been looking so much into this idea of representation is really for the film project we're working on. And the film is about a network reporter who's a disgraced reporter who takes to a Twitter account and then actually manipulates a special election for the Senate. So I've been looking into a lot of these issues. And, you know, it fascinates me because there was even recently this story about Joe Kennedy III, who's the grandson of Robert Kennedy, and he's going to run for Senate in Massachusetts. And, this like family hold on a Senate seat for, I mean, I don't even know how long. Ted Kennedy is from the 60s. He was elected.
Yeah. And then you got his cousins and uncles
the original, the father of John F. Kennedy was a senator, I think.
Yeah, but he was also a bootlegger before that. Yeah.
And the Bush family, was a senator. Prescott Bush was and the Senate seats like in Michigan and the House, John Dingell, who was there for like 50 or 60 years, his wife took the seat.
Right.
They talked about Cindy McCain taking over John McCain's seat.
It's like Bob Dole.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Dole in Texas.
Right.
Right.
And that there are these sort of like, properties. So I'm thinking a lot about that and how pernicious that can be. And then also how pernicious this idea of like someone like a rogue, someone on Twitter can actually have this outsized impact. So, it's sort of like which is worse and how the Senate and that can be manipulated. And just how powerful these people are, that they're elected on local issues, but outside super PACs give money because the senators then, like Mitch McConnell, like he's affecting everyone's lives and he's elected by...
And let's not forget his wife, the Chinese wife, her family's billionaire.
Elaine Chao, who's the Secretary of
huge
Transportation.
Companies in China.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one example. And now she's on Trump's cabinet. So it's just all so intertwined.
And how the influence, from in small states, like we were just talking about, states like Delaware and Montana that have very low populations can elect a senator who could become a Senate majority leader, who's in line of succession for the presidency, look at all the things that Mitch McConnell has done.
Right. And what is he, Kentucky?
Kentucky, yeah. Huh. And so, how do
they might want to start with dental care first and then work out from there.
Well, Kentucky actually, they have Obamacare is very popular. Yeah, there.
They don't want to get rid of it
enough. Yeah, because it's one of the most successful implementations anywhere of uninsured people. In Kentucky of uninsured people. Yeah, but the branding is wrong.
Right.
Branding's always a great thing to talk about too, because people are like, I hate Obama, but
they didn't know that Affordable Care Act. Remember, a lot of people didn't know it was the same thing. They used a different name for it. It was like it's actually Obamacare that you're loving. You're saying you love one and hate the other, but it's the same.
And it's, saving your life. So,
and it's basically could be Medicare for all, but, that's beside the point.
Right.
So the new script that you're talking about, was there any particular reporter that you're sort of basing it on, or is it sort of a kind of a combination of a lot of people? Of
the power of these people,
right?
And to sway opinion that have their followers that then can get retweeted and followed, and then they can give out evidence of things that then people take as fact.
It's like Fox News.
Yeah. And it's funny because, there's this great kind of egalitarian sense of communication, but then if it's not the right message, how wrong it can go. So it's great that people are allowed to subscribe to the channels that they want. But if the news isn't the news, like, should you be allowed to buy cigarettes and alcohol?
The problem or the dilemma is when you really start talking to, like, say, a diehard Fox News listener, they then will say that, well, MSNBC and CNN are just as bad in the opposite direction. So they believe that the same misinformation, it's wrong information either way. So you're playing, but CNN plays strictly to the liberals and Fox plays simply to the conservatives. But if you've ever flipped over, like during a crisis or something, if you flip over to Fox, they're still talking about Hillary's emails.
Well, there's this great saying,
or Benghazi,
that your right to swing your fist ends at the other person's face. And so, yes, you should be able to have your own information, but as a voter, if you're making decisions that affect other people, then there should be some sort of line about what the truth is. I mean, everyone's, can go out and go to the movies, or they can say and believe what they want, but they can't restrict their rights. And just like with gay marriage, right? It's fine. You can have your religious belief, but your belief shouldn't restrict another person's rightful behavior.
A majority can't impose on to a minority. That's
exactly.
How it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, that's why the Senate is the way it is. So be careful, though.
That's right. Well, that's the problem. Herein lies the big, scary wolf.
Yeah.
So it's because it's interesting if you talk to a diehard social conservative, they will. The scary thing about a lot of the Trump voters when I see them interviewed is like they don't they actually don't know what the issues are. They don't know what's real. They believe what Trump is saying.
Right. Well, I got the sense that I've talked to people, and a lot of those voters are motivated by rage or this sort of anger or whatever they say. And the one good thing about that is that those are limited quantities. Rage burns out, like joy and goodness like don't. So that I think this as a phase we can get past it. Yeah. And you can't sustain that forever. I don't know though, but we're in the middle of it, so it's hard.
Yeah. It's hard because when the Mueller investigation is very parallel to Nixon. So for me, I was born in 1964. Watergate, I was sort of a kid, 10 or 11. Did I pay attention? I mean, I sort of paid it. I mean, what 10-year-old pays attention to it?
Right.
So, but it's not, here we are all these years later, and we never thought like Watergate would happen again. And now Trump is like Watergate time. And the Mueller report.
It's almost so much more complicated that people can't figure out how wrong it was.
Right. Well, and again, depending on who you talk to, they think Mueller was a bad guy. So it's, what's fascinating about your new project is that's what kind of all this is sort of about.
Right.
It's sort of who's
people,
right.
People who get caught up in the middle of it. And, this sort of thing about, quote unquote, normal people that have this outside influence and outsized influence. And the one thing, that I just sort of difference of politics and entertainment, really believed in the script has very much a happy ending, and a happy ending in the sense that the, quote unquote, right thing happens.
Right.
And how is that possible? But, like we were talking about with the system, like if these loopholes are closed, if we take things that were precedent and make them law, there is enough to salvage that the system was never made, assuming that necessarily everyone was always going to act well.
Properly.
It's just that they always assume that people would act in their own interests.
Right. Which they are.
Yeah. But, then if those different interests align, that there can still be protections, that as long as people know what their interests truly are with information, with education.
Well, but like we said earlier, the protections may be there, but then are the people going to enforce them? That's the problem. Like, if enough people get behind a corrupt president, they can keep him in office. It's the same thing that happened with Hitler years ago. People go, "Oh, don't bring up Hitler," but Hitler was not a hated person in the beginning. A lot of people liked him, and he just sort of evolved and changed. And my best friend is from Venezuela, and he's taught me a lot about watching what happened in that country. The same way this guy came along that was sort of Trump-like, and he was very kind of divisive, but he got in. Then he was reelected, and then he stayed, but then he was not elected, and he didn't leave. And so by the time that happened, he had undermined their entire government to the point that it is now just a shithole, literally shithole country, with the have and the have-nots, and they can't get rid of him. And my friend's family owned this beautiful hotel for hundreds of years, and it's all been taken away from them, and they had to flee and leave and come to the U.S. So, and Trump loves him. Well, loves the dictator there.
I would hope that in the United States we have a stronger base of something than that.
See, the problem with that, though, is we don't. We're being shown right now we don't, because look at what Trump's gotten away with so far. I mean, it may take. When I look at the protests in Hong Kong that have been going on, you just go, oh my God, I don't know if enough Americans would even bother to put our phones down long enough to show up somewhere. I mean, it is astounding when I look at Hong Kong with all the thousands of people like shutting down the airport and stuff. So I just love to be able to engage with someone who actually is interested in politics, because now it seems like it's really 100% one or the other. People are either fully engaged and like riled up about it, or they just they're just watching cat videos, and they've gone the other way. 100%, right? Yeah. It's like I don't talk about. They'll say I don't talk politics. Like, but of all times when you might want to be engaged,
now's the time.
Now's the time. Yeah.
Well, so I hope that is an example to people of the younger generations, and that they do keep talking about it
stay connected,
but also keep talking about it, but without getting so wrapped up that you can't, because that does happen too. And I just been living in New York, and there's plenty of people few weeks after the election, they just couldn't function. It's like, well, this is the time you need to be functional.
You
can't just become like absolutely.
You can't get into it. I mean, look, it's 3 years now. We survived.
Yeah.
Of course we're always going to survive.
Yeah.
But it's just, I've had to sort of really stop a lot of the coverage I watch also.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point it does become so negative.
But I have noticed too, though, I mean, among artists and people that are creating things, like there is this sense of, then importance, because the time we're living in, it's like, well, how is this work important? What is it saying? Right. What's the message? And I do appreciate that, because you're asking like when I was growing up, and I think there was more of this idea of just sort of frothy entertainment, right? And I mean, you mentioned Seinfeld was a show about nothing, and that was fine, and so again, like another positive of as bad as things are, like that it is actually making people say, what is this work about? And actually, and who is this work representing? And, the diversity of perspective, of casting, of creative people involved. And, it's actually it's wonderful to have those conversations, because, different diverse writers and directors then bring in these new perspectives that actually make roles better for everyone.
Right, exactly.
So, we benefit from that. And it's a bad example of a bad, sort of thing that's happened, but it is the way of the world that, a lot of good things can come out of something that's bad. And that's kind of like we're saying with the script of art, that the ending is like a happy ending. It's like, well, can everything go wrong, but then it still turn out all right? And that's sort of the idea of humility too, is right. That then there is something that can shape it. And so we, have to be engaged, but it's not all on our shoulders.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really not black or white. No. It's all, there's a lot of gray in there.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of other acting stuff, like when you look ahead for your career, we all have sort of our like wishful, like we see it, our careers going a certain way. I've sort of learned to just, let it happen,
That's actually what I was going to say, is like see what comes. And
right. I mean, you want to continue to direct and more so act.
Yeah, more so in acting.
Write.
And I mean, when I've written roles for myself, and that's great. But then, like I was just saying, as far as being stretched by other things, and so I almost don't want to tie it down, because I've created the very specific things that I want, and then the rest of it could be anything.
Right.
It's very much like whatever the universe brings.
But also, once you've sort of produced and created stuff, it's I always tell, I think all actors should try to create their own projects, because you're not just at the mercy of somebody else.
But it's also nice to show up and just not be responsible.
Hello, right? Because I tend to do a lot of things. I'm a little Jamaican that way.
Yeah.
But that's why people say to me, like, the acting thing is great, because I just show up and let everyone else deal with everything.
I don't know about the insurance on this thing. I don't know about
really care.
Doesn't matter if I bring water bottle.
When they're saying there's checks, someone's check bounced, I'm like, mine cleared.
Now my account.
So when people say, like, people will say, so Daniel, what does a producer do? That's always a question when I produce things too. And what do you say to that? I know that's ludicrous, because it's so many different types of producers.
You just make sure everything happens.
Keeps all the balls in the air.
Yeah. I mean,
but there's creative producers who sort of are more there in terms of the script and the putting the actors together. But then you have sort of the line producers, obviously, who handle the finances and stuff like that. You're more geared towards
the creative side.
Yeah.
And I think when I say making things happen, it's in the sense of like, facilitating conversations and, people speak very different languages. There's like the very technical, and some directors are very technical versus like working with actors.
Right.
And
every actor has their own kind of process.
Yeah. And I think it's also helpful, for a creative producer to sometimes give a sense of, how is this work going to be positioned, in the market, and actually can help the actors in the sense of genre or what we're going for, how this fits in versus other films, because it's a question of like, what are we all doing besides
our thing? Yeah,
our individual thing that's cordoned off from everybody.
This final product. And in today's world, thank God for all these platforms, there's no way, like, I can't keep up. As a viewer, I have no idea who else is, but as an actor, it's such a blessing to have all these potential jobs or whatever, but like I'll read in the trades and I'll say like, you know, such and such show canceled after 3 seasons, and I'm like, what? I've never even heard of it.
Right.
Like, where was it?
But it'll still be there. So if you want to go watch it,
it's streaming. But I'm just still like, oh wait, I've never even. When did 3 seasons? I missed what?
Yeah.
When was the first 2? But because they're, you know, Hulu, Amazon. Yeah. Now every network has their own streaming, which is fantastic.
Well, you know, I was talking to a Broadway producer, and he said this thing. He said, you know, the reason I like to do Broadway is that I can actually see everything,
right,
every season.
That's true.
And even off, you know, the off Broadway.
I mean, if they're going to keep adding, if they're going to move Broadway over to
there's fewer and fewer though. Actually,
I know. But it would be the idea that they just suddenly start putting theaters on other streets, right? And then there'll be a time where like, well, I can't get to all these shows,
right. But
that's
now you
can
happen. See everything,
and you're kind of seeing too. When we talked about earlier, where people were making content now, it was always about getting your product in the movie theater. Mm-hmm. You would do a film and it was all about the big premiere and whatever, and TV was sort of a different genre. Now it's really flipped, where most films today are Marvel and concept movies. If it's not an animated, it's a big explosion, action. You're really, to me, the really quality films, character-driven kind of stuff, is all going to Netflix and the VOD platforms. Right. And that's where we're seeing in television, the big movie stars are all doing TV now because that's where the quality scripts are.
Well, I think it's like different artists and different media. I mean, you look at the Marvel films and you see like amazing artists in the sense of the visual designers and the the effects. I mean, there's incredible visuals in those movies and Doctor Strange and the things that they create. But the actors could
just be created.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the actors have even said that in interviews. You know, that they're just like posed and they look a certain direction and
green screened and CGI. You know, so
So I think it is exciting for certain artists, and then the other acting artists are finding television in there, you know, because I do love those movies, and it's kind of always been, I feel like, you know, there were always the sort of prestige, like the acting pictures that get nominated for Academy Awards, and then there's the ones that everyone goes and sees.
The ones that make the money.
Right.
They're starting to blend a little bit. But it's just, I mean, I love it as an actor. Yeah. We're living in this time of just incredible opportunity, you know. And then, like you said, but in terms of like political shows, you'll see all that. You'll see political shows. A lot of the shows that have a lot of depth are ending up on cable and the streaming services. Is there a show, anything now that you're like really hooked on in terms of, like for me, I watch tons of reality and I watch a few scripted, but are you into any certain series? Like, is there a show you either have to, you DVR it and you watch it, or is there like Sunday nights I'm watching?
I have to say, honestly, I watch a lot of like films. I tend to like watch more like movies and not as much television. Like if television, you know, like I'll watch like a whole season, but I feel like it's like a long
Do you binge? Will you actually sit down and watch? Because I can't get through like more than 2 at one time.
Not really.
My attention span is.
I also feel like I'm not doing it justice after about 2 or 3 of them. I feel like I'm not getting it, and so I try to stop.
But my problem is I just can't find the time to go back to it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So because there's so much to do in the world. My friends who say, "Oh, I binged like Game of Thrones in a weekend." I'm like, "What did you leave the house?"
I don't think they do.
I can't do that. I have too much going on. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, the time has flown. So great. Thank you. We could talk forever.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Thank you so much for
having me
here.
Yeah.
Everyone, remember, go to Amazon and find Loyalty, and you can find.
I think it comes up first in the search now. And Loyalty.
Really?
If you type in Loyalty, so you should be able to find it. Yeah.
Do you want to give the name of the new project that's going to come out, or do you want to wait?
We'll wait.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Yeah.
We'll have Daniel will be back to promote that as well.
I'd love to.
And everyone, once again, Daniel Mitura, thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you so much.
You've been listening to One-on-One with Jasper Cole, and we will see you next time. Peace out. Bye.
Thanks for checking out One-on-One with Jasper Cole. Check out past episodes and get the latest as they're released. Subscribe today on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube.